Hello and welcome back to another geography explaining video. It's been a long time coming, but thanks to the one and only Mr. Bijoui, we got the new videos coming. So sit back, relax, and actually learn and be active. And we're gonna jump right into it because we're gonna continue with the temperature factors. This is part 2. If you haven't seen the first part, I highly recommend it. It will show you the temperature factors, latitude, altitude, and the land-sea division. But in today's video, we will also look into the temperature factors of the sea currents, or the ocean currents rather, the effects of onshore and offshore winds, and we will look into the effect of mountain ranges and the placement of those mountain ranges and how they affect temperatures. Isn't that right, Frans? Yeah, I thought so. Anyhow, as you might have noticed, we are in a little bit of a cold area. As you can see, there's some snow around, and there are some mystical arrows in the ocean. Yeah, exactly. So, the first thing we will talk about are the ocean currents and how they affect the temperature. A very good example on how ocean currents affect the temperature is by looking at the weather report of America. And now you might probably think, America, what does that have to do with this? Well, I'll show you on the map. As you can see on the map, New York City is actually closer to the equator than Amsterdam, the Netherlands. But somehow they still have crazier winters, with big snowstorms every year and more snow, and lots of trouble that comes with it.
And leaving drivers stranded along stretches of roadway. Close to 150 cars were stuck on a 4-mile stretch of the New York State Thruway.
But here in Amsterdam, we barely get any snow. So why is that? Well, for that, we have to look at the ocean currents. In the world, the ocean brings around warm and cold water. There are currents, and some of those currents, a flow of water, is cold, and others are warm. In this scenario, we have a cold ocean current passing by, as you can see by the blue or icy arrows. And this will bring a relatively colder temperature with it. A colder ocean current will bring colder temperatures. Now it started raining. By flying above this area, you can see that this cold current from the ocean creates a much colder area around the land. Now, if we fly over to this side of the island, we can see another type of color, the red color, indicating a more warmer ocean current. And with these warmer ocean currents, the land around it will also be relatively warmer. And this is the case in Europe. We have a warm ocean current passing by our continent and country. So, a warm ocean current will bring warmer or temperate temperature. Temperature. This is especially visible in winter, because during the winter, the ocean is relatively warm. So we don't really get that strong snowy winter as we saw in New York. We get those temperate, mild winters with a bit of smoochy snow. So to conclude the temperature factor ocean current, you can say that the temperature of the ocean current, so a cold one or a warm one, affects the temperature around the land close to the ocean. For example, in the Netherlands, we have relatively mild winters because the ocean is very warm. And in North America, they have relatively cold winters because the ocean is relatively cold. Another temperature factor is the positioning of mountains. In the first part, we learned that mountains themselves are a temperature factor. the higher you go, the colder it gets. But the warm or cold air that's blowing around cannot pass through a mountain. So as soon as the wind hits the mountain, it goes over or it goes to the sides. And this blocks the cold or warm temperature. And therefore, mountains can change the temperature in the landscapes around them. So the position of mountains or mountain ranges can influence the temperature in the surrounding areas. For our final temperature factor, we have to look at two different time periods in the year. First, we look at the temperature factor in winter, and then we'll look at the temperature factor in the summer. And the temperature factor what we're talking about is the wind direction. If the wind goes onshore, from the ocean to the land, or offshore, from the land to the ocean. First, we'll look at the winter period. So this is the winter period. An important thing to know with the onshore and offshore wind temperature factor is the difference between land and oceans. In my first video, I explained how the ocean heats up and cools down at a different speed than the land. In short, land heats up very quickly and cools down very quickly, and the ocean doesn't heat up very quickly and also doesn't cool down very quickly, meaning that during winter, the ocean can still be quite warm compared to the land. And the other way around, during summer, the ocean is still a little bit cold from winter because it didn't have time to warm up properly. This difference in temperature from the land and the ocean has effects when the wind blows from the land to the ocean or from the ocean to the land, onshore winds and offshore winds. So during winds that go offshore from land to ocean, we can see that the land is still very cold in the winter. So there's lots of snow and it's cold, and it brings this cold air with it. And you can see that this cold air travels and travels all the way to the beach and even maybe into the ocean. And at some point, this wind will warm up a little bit from the heat of the ocean and the ice will be gone. If you look at a map of Europe, you can see that the Netherlands is next to the ocean. But during winter, sometimes we have crazy winter storms with snow and ice everywhere. And then there's a big chance that the wind comes from the east, from the mainland of Europe. Because in the mainland, it is relatively cold and it brings all this cold air towards us on the ocean. On the other hand, during winter, the ocean is still relatively warm compared to the land. Still has a bit of that heat from the summer. If the wind is onshore during winter, it will bring this relatively warm air over to first the Netherlands and then more into Europe. And this is when our winters are pretty meh, when we don't have that much snow and it is not really cold. It's like maybe 0 degrees. There's maybe a little bit of snow there in the distance, just on the beach. But other than that, it doesn't really bring that much cold because we have this heat from the ocean that gets blown over onshore towards us. So you see in winter how a relatively cold mainland can bring very cold air with it and give snow all the way to the beach, or when the wind comes from the ocean, it is relatively warm and brings this relatively warm air with it, creating a less exciting winter. So now we will go over to the summer period. Yes, the summer period, nice and sunny, nice and warm. So let's write down summer period. During the summer, it is kind of flipped around. The onshore and offshore winds still bring air with them, but now the land is much warmer than the ocean. The ocean still is a little bit cold from winter. It's kind of warming up, but it's not catching on as quickly as the land. So if there is an offshore wind, the relatively warm air gets blown all the way from inside the land towards the beach. Here's the beach. So towards the beach, and it will bring this nice and warm, comfy summer. And then once it's over the ocean, the air will cool down a bit. The other way, the air from the ocean is still a little bit cold. Remember, because the ocean is still a little bit cold from winter. Doesn't heat up that quickly. So it brings relatively cold air over to the beach. And as soon as it gets into the land further and further, it will heat up more and more. So the beach will be relatively cold. Again, when we look at a map of Europe, you can now understand that if we have a very, very warm summer, the wind probably comes from the east, because this is where mainland Europe is. Most of the land, so most of the warm air. If the wind comes from the west, so that way, we know that it brings relatively cold air. So we have a relatively cold summer, so maybe 20 degrees. But if the wind comes from the east, from the mainland, we have a relatively warm summer, maybe 30 degrees. And this is how the onshore and offshore winds affect the temperature. Alrighty, that was it. That was all the temperature factors that you needed to know. With both the videos, this one and part 1, you now know all the temperature factors and how they influence the temperature. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you again in the next one. Goodbye!